Cool. Thank you, Laura. That's a good idea, for sure. So thank you all for coming to this. The idea here is to revisit some of the hosting technologies out there, well, specifically one, and talk about where we are with regards to hosting and where we'd like to be, and moving forward, what we might want to do. I'm going to probably have to let the dogs out in a second, but bear with me. So just to give you a little history lesson, why we decided to host was essentially because we were really struggling in some states with IT, trying to get the proper access. We still do, there's one of our states, well, provinces, it takes 6 months literally to get customer service pushed from, we think it should be all the way to production. And so it's, it's kind of, it was a bit of a hassle. And so we decided we go ahead and offer hosting essentially at cost. We wouldn't make a profit on it. We wanted to encourage people to do it, not because we wanted more money, but because we wanted an easier access to the system where we can go in and run the scripts that we need to run. And I think people that do have a hosted system, such as yourselves, do get better customer service as a general rule than those that do not, just because of the roadblocks that we have to deal with when dealing with certain IT requirements. So that was the goal. And so we went down the path of doing that. We wanted to use Amazon Web Services, AWS, initially, but basically what happened was we tried it and it was phenomenally slow. Not just a little bit slow, it was super slow, which is strange. And Amazon's a very scalable thing. You can throw lots of hardware at a problem to make it faster, and we kept doing that, but things didn't get appreciably faster. And ultimately, we discovered it was because, they were using magnetic disks, because that was the technology kind of the time. And just the latency and the hard drive storage was just too slow. And hard drive access is kind of the key thing for a database application like ours. I mean, having extra memory or extra CPU power doesn't necessarily help. It's having quick hard drive access that's kind of the key. And so we very reluctantly backed out of the AWS. I think we were working with Idaho. We could not get a configuration, regardless of cost, that would get them as good of performance as just like on our dev servers, RSF1, RSF2. So we backed away from that. And we actually looked at more than AWS. At the time, I think Azure was kind of fledgling, but it existed. And I think that's the other one we tried. But anyway, it was the same thing, it was slow. So we moved to a dedicated server where basically you have a contract with somebody and they create a server for you. It's available on the web. They give it internet access and you get remote desktop access and you set it up and you're good to go. We did discover that there are quite a few problems with that though, and problems that we've been battling to this day from a hardware perspective, from just all of a sudden something changing because it's all rack mounted stuff, and they would move our servers from one to the next thinking it wouldn't hurt anything, and it did because of our VPN access and stuff. So there were a lot of flaws. We decided to move to a different dedicated service provider, and that was a horrible, horrible nightmare. Idaho lost their server, like literally from the ground up. We had to completely reprovision servers, something like 3 or 4 times during those days. And so we moved back to Limestone, and that's where we are now. So all of your servers are currently hosted in a Dallas room somewhere, and they're all actually rack pieces of machines in there with hard drives directly connected to them that give us, pretty good performance. And that's the paradigm we're at now. And yeah, basically the pros and cons, the dedicated, which is what we're doing now, it's just kind of a standard computer. There's no mystery there. We don't have to understand the cloud world to use it. And it is less expensive for sure than Amazon for most things. The cons were that we didn't get the IT support that we really needed from either Limestone or the other one. We had to outsource that to other people because IT is not our expertise, and they, caused some problems. It's also super inflexible. We've run into, actually just this year, we had to upgrade. We had to completely swap out someone's machine because I think we ran out of disk space, and they couldn't do any more disk space on this tier, so we had to go to a different tier, which meant completely starting from scratch, provisioning a new machine, spending the 3-day weekend to copy everything over. Just a pain. The cloud, on the other hand, gives us a huge amount of flexibility. The things I was just talking about don't happen in the cloud. With Amazon Web Services, if your computer is too slow, you just upgrade you just click a button in the interface, and poof, now all of a sudden you've got 16 gigs of RAM instead of 8. It's all virtual. It's all super easy to configure, super flexible. They've got great monitoring tools. The backup is awesome. That's the other thing with Dedicated, is we have to use Oracle backup tools, which are just a nightmare to maintain and run. RMAN is horrible. The cons being that it's super expensive. Not super, it's actually gotten relatively cheap compared to where it was, but it is more expensive than just Dedicated. So what is AWS? It's basically, it's not too much of an exaggeration to say it's basically the cloud. It's got a huge number of services that you touch every day, whether you know it or not. That's where Netflix hosts their stuff. I'd say most, well, actually for sure most. I think they have something like 80% market share right now with cloud stuff. So, most of the applications you use are going to be using AWS as their data store, as their network, as their application servers, to run their websites. AWS is kind of the king of that world. And they have a zillion services, but we only use a few. Let me see if I can find let's just open a new window. You guys are still seeing my screen, right?
Yes.
All right, cool. So Amazon has a huge number of services that you can use as a developer to do whatever you need to do. We use just a few here at the top, but I mean, machine learning, all the satellite, that's cool. You can apparently communicate with satellites using AWS tools. We need to add that module to Jackalope. Make a Jira for that, Laura. But we use basically just two. We use EC2, which is the application server. It's basically a virtual machine that you can log into through remote desktop and fiddle with, Jackalope settings and all that other fun stuff. And then we use their database provider, which is, they call RDS, which stands for something. Probably the D is involves database. And that's where we store Oracle. And then there's other things that we have to deal with here. The cool thing about all of this is it's, completely configurable. You can change how many CPUs you need, or have, memory, network, all the things. And you can really fine tune what you need. And key to that is now, as of about 2 years ago or something, Amazon has switched to exclusively using solid state drives. So no more magnetic storage, and they fixed whatever the throughput problem they had back 4 years ago when we were doing this originally. And you can configure storage in the same way you could configure anything else. You can throw a huge amount of money at it and get absurd throughput speeds, way more than we need. So yay, they fixed the storage problem, and it seems to be that we can it's a viable option now. So here's just kind of a matrix just showing you sort of, you pay, it's kind of a nickel and dime situation where every little thing, you get charged for. You set up the server, you get charged for that. You set up then you get charged for the hard drive space. Then you get charged for the network, the guaranteed network or internet throughput. And then you get charged for how much data you transfer and how, back and forth and all of these things. And it's kind of sometimes hard to predict exactly how much you're going to get cost or how much you're going to get charged. Laura right now is our cost monitor. She loves this job, I know. Just for our, because we use AWS internally for things, and you know, trying not to let it get out of hand. She's been very helpful with that. The other thing AWS gives you is a lot more security than we can give you with the dedicated server. I mean, if we had a huge IT department, we could probably emulate the same sort of security that Amazon has. But the reality is, we don't. I mean, it's perfectly secure for what it is, but things like just directly accessing the database is not possible in our environment unless you have VPN servers and things like that. And we just have a lot more flexibility with Amazon with regards to locking things down and making sure that only you can have access to stuff. It's a pretty good security system. So Amazon's way, I'm not going to say way more secure, because we're equally secure because we basically block you from doing anything, which is a perfectly secure option, but not as useful as not being blocked and still being secure. So that's that. And I've already talked about this. Kind of I said it was flexible. What that means is it's scalable. Like I said, if you're running slow or you add a whole bunch of new sites, and instead of having 100 ATRs to process every day, you have 300, and they're all WIM, because I know that's happening all over the place. We can just bump up the CPU, bump up the memory or whatever we need to do, or even add another Jackalope server. There's a lot of things we can do that we can't do now without a huge amount of effort. The availability, I don't know that people are going to be super interested in this that are in this meeting, but we happen to be responding to an RFP right now that there has to be hot swappable stuff. If it goes down, it has to automatically, fail over to, something that's not down. And we get that flexibility with Amazon at a huge price. Basically, you multiply your quote times 2. But I mean, it's possible, and you can do that. But Amazon, as a general rule, doesn't go down. I say this about a month after they had a huge outage, but other than that little blip, in general, they are pretty solid. So I just talked about the security. That's a thing. At-rest encryption, probably no one cares about, but it's another requirement we see in RFPs. You have to be able to encrypt the data while it's not moving. there's encryption at rest, which is just sitting there on the hard drive. No one can just access it and look at it. And then there's security in transit, which is like the HTTPS stuff. But we do the transit stuff just great, HTTPS. But the at-rest encryption for Oracle requires Oracle Enterprise, which makes our Oracle bill go from $1,500 a year to $65,000 a year, which is pretty big. And I'll go through the options in a little bit, but it's insane. So what we did is we essentially wanted to test this. We dip our toe in the water every once in a while to see what the state of the technology is. And so what we did is we took Idaho. Margaret was kind enough to let us use her database. And so we took the Idaho production database, and the reason we used Idaho is big. They have a huge amount of data because they do I think exclusively vehicle record collections. So they have a huge amount of data, and their database, I believe, is our biggest. And so that's the one we wanted to test with. We wanted to kind of get an idea of whether it's actually quick enough now with the solid state drives, which it was, and whether it would be affordable enough to get the same performance as what they're getting from Limestone. And that was kind of the purpose of the testing. So we basically just used that RDS service, the Oracle database service, and put their database into that. And then we created a Jackalope app server, and when we were going through the options, we sort of picked something that would sort of be similar to Limestone, you know, with the number of CPUs, the number of the amount of memory, stuff like that. And so we sort of took a stab at what the best configuration would be. And then we did some performance testing. Well, Laura did most of the performance testing, which basically was looking at long queries, long reports, long file processing, and just comparing between the real JID prod hosted by Limestone and this new AWS hosted JID prod. And Laura found basically they are identical. And then Vicky and maybe others at Idaho did their own performance testing, and they got a little bit more into the weeds, and they did more things like querying the public database and stuff like that. And actually, I haven't heard how Vicky's testing has gone. I don't know if you had, if I think in general I heard it was good, and then you're going to test the PDB vehicle record table, and I don't know if that went well.
Yeah, so I was able, I was able to query both our, our regular statistics that we use quite a bit, and I couldn't find the PDB vehicle record table, but it was a view, and that's why I couldn't find it in the other one. So yeah. I did end up finding it and was able to query that as well, and didn't have any issues from what I tested.
I'm sorry, repeat that?
Yeah, I was able to access it just fine, and I didn't experience any problems. It didn't seem like it was going any slower than what I would be doing normally.
Okay, great. That's fabulous news. And by the way, I wasn't expecting this. I've looked at, I mean, we use AWS ourselves for other things, but not for running Jackalope. I wasn't expecting it to be, I was expecting we were going to have to like really throw money at it and really, bump up the tiers and like double the CPUs and double, just because of our earlier experience. But it wasn't. I mean, we're actually, I'm impressed. It worked out really well. So again, thanks Idaho, thanks Vicky for your testing, and Margaret for letting us use your data. So it's, I think it's, I think it's going to work. Honestly, I think like I said, I had a change of heart. I was just doing it. I wasn't really expecting a lot, but it actually works, and it's not $100,000 a year. It's more like $20,000 a year for basically our biggest state, Idaho. And so, and there's a lot of ways to slice this and dice it, and you can make it cheaper by doing certain things, and you could certainly make it more expensive by doing certain things. But yeah, Idaho's instance was about 20,000, and you can kind of see. So this was the estimate, and that's with 10 terabytes of data, because unfortunately the way it works is you have to have like twice what your database size is in storage because of backups and because of imports and all this other stuff like that. So essentially the way this broke down was, I don't remember the percentage, but it was close to 80% of the cost of Idaho's system was in the storage. Let me go back. Basically, so it costs about $20,000 a year. This monthly is basically the storage, but minus this little support thingy. So minus $125. So it's $1,200 a month plus $1,250 a month, which, if you can quickly do math, I don't know, what is that, for $1,500 or $15,000? It's actually more than that, because it was more like 80 or 70% of this total. So almost all of the storage, or all the cost is in storage, which is good news for people that don't live in Boise, because other states, Delaware, I think most of our states wouldn't require 10 terabytes, of storage space, and they could get by much cheaper. So let me go back to my slides. All right, I don't have full screen. Well, whatever. Okay, so I looked at Idaho, and so that's about 20,000. If we were to do exactly what we're doing now, Margaret, oops, it would be about 20,000 a year just in AWS costs. And then we have additional out-of-pocket costs that we have to deal with in addition to that, which I can talk about in a second. I then just went and said, well, what if Idaho only needed 6 terabytes? And 6 terabytes gets us into a much more reasonable area. Just if you don't know, we charge currently $18,000 a year for hosting. It's a little bit more than that now because of increases, but it's not. It's about 18,000. And so Margaret or Idaho, not only would we be losing 2,000 directly right here, we'd also be losing because we have those other out-of-pocket expenses I was talking about. But 6 terabytes is actually reasonable. That's enough under 18,000 that we could probably deal with that. So I don't want to make any decisions right now. I mostly wanted to throw out this information. You may or may not care where your server is hosted. We care. It would make our life a lot easier to support an AWS system as opposed to a dedicated system that we have to maintain and have to do the IT for and all this other stuff. You would have better access to your server if we went to AWS, and you'd have a lot more reliability. No one's going to move that machine somewhere else and have it screw up all of our VPN stuff, and no one's, hard drives aren't going to fail. Amazon Cloud deals with that already. That's kind of under the hood. It takes care of that stuff. You don't have to worry about hardware failures per se. So, you would benefit from it, although it may not be in your face. It would be a long-term benefit for you in terms of reduction of failures, better access. So, I think I didn't finish the slide. So basically, what I was proposing was for those people that could live on 6 terabytes or less, and we can make that determination for you. We can go in your database and figure out how much your database, Idaho's is about 5 terabytes. But again, you have to double that in terms of storage. So if you are under 6 terabyte or 3 terabyte database size, which would result in a 6 terabyte AWS, we would actually be happy just keeping your existing $18,000 contract, because I estimate about $5,000 a year in other stuff. That's software, licenses, and all the things, as well as kind of a buffer, because there's so many pieces to AWS. This is probably not exactly correct, and it's not stable. We're going to have days or months where we want to do a huge export and it fails, so we do it again, and we're going to all of a sudden notice, oh, that cost $400 in network fees. So we have to have a little bit of a cushion just to probably break even. My thought is we'd probably break even with $5,000 plus whatever the AWS cost is, which for which for a 6 terabyte is 13, whatever that was, 13,000. So 13,000 plus 5 is roughly break even. So if you need 6 terabytes or less, I think we would be okay with just using the same contract and just putting you on AWS if that's something you wanted to do. If you're over 6 terabytes, and I don't know who that is other than Idaho, I was just thinking $5,000 plus the AWS cost, which, there's so many tweaks you can do. I'm not going to get into them today, but there's so many little things you can tweak to give you better this or better that, or in terms of when the loads are, and all these things all determine the price. Excuse me. So we can't predict exactly what each state's going to want there. So we're thinking if you have 6 terabytes or less, we'll use this estimate, which is basically what we're using in Idaho right now, and that will be your AWS. If you didn't want this, even if you had less than 6 terabytes because you wanted, redundancy, you wanted that hot failover stuff that I was talking about, you can go through the AWS pricing calculator with us because we know kind of what we need, probably better than you do with regards to the basics. And then, we can go over that with you then, if that's something you're interested in. And we can talk about transition in a second, but I would just like to get a feel from people if there's any interest in this or if we're just wasting our time. Is anybody interested in such a... So was that Margaret?
We're very interested right now. We can't just directly access our database, which means that we either have to download our data, which is what we're currently doing, which takes both physical and personnel resources, or we have to VPN in, which really doesn't allow for any kind of external or independent access for people who don't have the ability to VPN or systems that we want to just integrate. So for us, accessibility is huge. The one thing that I would want to have with it, though, is because we have gone in and we have looked at everything, is I would like a document that shows the architecture of the database and what all of that means so that we know what we're accessing. Because we were looking through all the tables going, we have no idea what any of these are. And for me, that additional cost is easily going to be paid for by all the time that Devin spends troubleshooting, downloading the database on a weekly basis. It's going to be paid for by the cost of the servers and the systems that we have to have up and running on site. So, when we actually do the estimate, what I need to know is, because of the way our contract is, in 4 years, so because I believe we're only through year 1 of a 5-year contract, I need an estimate for each of the 4 years to be able to make a modification. But for me, I've already talked to my management, told them I'm going to be bringing this to them. Okay.
Well, the cheapest option is to do a 3-year contract with Amazon when you do their thing. So that actually sounds maybe ideal. If you can, it's depending on, like, it's a 3-year contract, a 1-year contract, or on demand. They all have different prices and costs associated with them. And the 3-year, I'm just looking right here. We need, so 3-year, what do we have? So for you, we're paying everything up front. So this similar thing in the 3 years is convertible, right? And so actually we would go convertible, but so it's $668 for 1 year or $1,547 for 3. So, and this is just an example. All of their services, most of their services have the same sort of price break. So this is like times 3, this is 2,000-ish, right? And this, so you're actually getting, a 25% discount by going with a 3-year contract. But yes, and we, our internal database is arcane, Margaret. You may regret asking for a, description of what it all is. I mean, the whole reason we have the public database is so that people don't have to understand the internal database. But yeah, but we can discuss that. Is anybody? So Margaret raised something that I forgot to mention, which is, yeah. So Wisconsin, you have the same setup where once a week the FTP magically happens and somehow gets to your server. I don't know how big of a pain that is. Is Wisconsin here? I still can't see my attendee list.
I think I saw Rob jump in, but I don't recall.
Okay. All right. Well, so they're another place that they would be able to completely cut out that process. That's a thing for sure. For Kansas, we have this whole enterprise VPN setup, which we'd have to copy over to AWS. We spend a lot of time and effort trying to get that working. And so that might change for you, Bill, if you're still on.
Yeah.
But it would actually end up being cheaper. I think we had to add 3,000 a year or something, some cost per year, because we had to get a whole separate machine to run your VPN server. And I believe under AWS, there are plugins for that already. You don't have to have like an EC2 server to run a VPN thingy. I think you can just configure that through Amazon somehow, but that's beyond me. I don't know, but I think that would be something, that would be a place you would save money on. Is there anybody else that might be interested in this? It's again, I can't see who's here, but you can always call me if you are interested in it. We would basically go through and discuss all the options, and with Margaret, we talk about B2B access, and we figure out the best way to go forward. For those people, Margaret, that are over the 6 terabyte, there's obviously going to have to be some contract stuff, and maybe if you're not, even if you still are under the 6 terabyte, maybe we still have to do contract stuff. I don't know. That's a kind of a state-by-state evaluation of how that works. You wouldn't have to do a new contract from our perspective. We wouldn't care, what label is associated with the 18,000, but maybe internally you guys do care. We do a dry run transfer to Amazon of your instance. We wouldn't worry about data, and we wouldn't worry about concurrency and making sure that they were the same or anything like that. We just kind of do a dry run to make sure that the options that we discussed here work for you. Whether you're getting the performance that you want, and if we have some fancy option, whether that's actually working the way you wanted it to. And also to figure out how long it's going to take. I spent like 2 weeks doing the Idaho thing because it wasn't urgent. And I regret that now. I wish I had done it from start to finish, just to, as quickly as I could, just to figure out how long this process takes. I don't really know for sure. But that would be part of this dry run, is figuring out how long it takes to do it. So, because basically when we do it, we're going to have to take Jackalope down. Because whatever data you put into the Limestone server while we're doing the Jackalope is basically going to be lost. So you can either run it in Limestone with the expectation that it's going to go away, and then rerun it in AWS, or just be, and that would be something we discuss up here too, is, what's the best way for availability for everybody? Pretend the Limestone is read-only until we go live with AWS. That's something we would discuss. And we keep the Limestone server around for a while. Maybe it needs more than a month. That's something we just have to discuss, and whether you want a dual process. There's no code changes. It's not I'm not worried about Jackalope operating differently or coming up with different numbers on the AWS server. It's just kind of all about the infrastructure and whether it's doing what you want it to do. And then eventually we just deprovision Limestone. And that's it. That's the process. So where do we go from here? It sounds like Margaret is interested, but we definitely have to deal with this sort of stuff, and we definitely have to figure out what exactly you want, Margaret.
Once we get some specs and things like that, going through the contracting, the way my contract is set up, it won't take more than, God willing, a matter of weeks to get something approved. But I need to know kind of what time frame, considering that our current maintenance agreement runs like September 1st through August 31st. We'd have to we just need more discussions.
Okay.
That's very doable.
We should plan a one-on-one discussion then at some point. Bill, are you interested enough to talk about this more?
Yes, I think so. Our main thing is going to be getting the contract straightened out, but yeah, if this will, especially if it'll be faster on the direct database access, that would be very useful.
Yeah, well, it would definitely be faster. You're not having to go through that VPN appliance thing that is set up right now. So,
Bill,
and
we actually we tested it out, logging into our data, and I believe Tony actually went into the interface and uploaded a file to test that out, and I downloaded a couple of reports, and then we went in and actually direct accessed into the database in the back end, and we had no problem with it. I mean, the biggest thing was we weren't sure what tables we were looking for, because the naming conventions are slightly different, but all of that, we played around in that for a while, had no problems with performance.
Right.
It worked really nice.
Oh, I love to hear that. That's fabulous. Yeah,
Good.
I want to go to AWS. I'm going to tell you just flat out. It would make our lives so much easier. Limestone is such a pain with many things. So, and AWS is kind of just the gold standard. It's what everybody uses now. It's just, I'm not worried about their security vulnerability, because way bigger fish than us have gone through and tested all that stuff. Or I'm not worried about the access or availability, because again, I mean, Netflix cannot afford for their stuff to go down. So, yeah, I'm excited it went this well. So, okay. Well, maybe we'll just send an email out after this, and just schedule follow-up meetings for next steps for those people that are interested. Just reply back, and we'll set up a meeting and talk about all the things and what you want out of it, and then talk about what contract things need to happen, and just go with that. And if anybody needs help doing, if they need to come up with an estimate that's specific to them, like you want us to know, if you want us to go and figure out how much space you'll need and then come up with an estimate and give it to you, just with the bare bones stuff that we did for Idaho, we can do that too. If you just need to look at that first before having a discussion. In fact, maybe we should just do that, Laura. Just go through everybody's database, production database, and figure out how big they are. And I can just go through and quickly modify the thing and just send off. We can send an estimate for everybody.
Okay.
And then basically the rule would be, just add 5,000 to it. Would be your total hosting cost. Cool. All right. Awesome. Well, that's it from my perspective.